Lil Wayne is the Michael Jackson of hip hop, and here's why. You ready?
I think hip hop will always be a voice for the people.
Hey everybody, I'm Reggie Williams, founder and CEO of Ambrosia for Heads, and with me I have Jake Payne, our editor-in-chief, and together we are AFH's What's the Headline podcast. Yeah, what's happening, man?
Man, another day in paradise. Another hot weekend here in Philly. How about you?
Yo, you got the different background too. You're back in your spot.
Yeah, I shift from place to place. Hopefully the light's not too much of a distraction.
Nah, it's cool. You got the super high-fi Wi-Fi now, right?
Yeah, man, I'm stepping into the Y2K, 20 years late.
You're looking crispy and clear though.
Yeah, thank you. The beautiful thing about living in a city like Philadelphia, which is where Comcast headquarters is that you can get pretty much free internet everywhere. But in the Zoom culture, it is not happening like that. So I needed to upgrade myself.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. I'm in Zooms all day, every day, like literally like 10, 12 hours a day. It's insane, you know.
Yeah, it's now it's the new normal, man.
Yeah, it is. It is. So crazy week in hip hop. You are in Philly, and so I think it's just only right that we start with some very sad news. Malik B of the Roots, the original Roots crew, passed away this week, age 47.
That's what I've seen too.
That was a tough one, man. The Roots have been one of my all-time favorite artists in hip hop. I would put them easily top 10 for me, maybe top 5. Just everything that they've done, from, internally as the Roots together, the offspring like the James Poysers of the world, and, the hand he's had in D'Angelo and Jill Scott and Erykah Badu and people like that. I saw the Roots perform in 1994. No, 95. It was 95. It was, I'll go back, man. I used to watch Rap City, The Countdown, every week at like Friday at like midnight or so when I was in law school. And there are three distinct songs from that period where just my mind was blown the first time I heard them. One was Mass Appeal, Gangstar. Another was Outkast, Players Ball. And the third was Distortion of Static. And when Distortion of Static came out, I think it was like October or so of 1994, the video dropped. And dude, I looked for that record everywhere. Like, I looked for like months and months and months because they released a single way before the album came out. And I eventually found it on cassette in Central Square. It was like about, there's a stop away from Harvard Square. Okay. And this real small like record store, just I remember the blue cover and everything. And Black Thought and Malik B, because I've obviously Thought went on to become what he's become, but they're very much for me were like the Big Boy and Andre, where at that time it was Thought and Malik, and the two were peers, and both were just like shredders when it came to like that MCing. And so I saw them live in Axis, a club in Boston. Little club, maybe held like 300 people. Questlove did a DJ set. Before that, it's the first time I heard the Milkbone joint, Keep It Real, that everyone, samples. And it was a really, really special experience. And that album to this day, Do You Want More is probably top 10 for me. All albums. So, big loss for me. But what about you? I know being in Philly, you must have had some issues there too.
I mean, it's interesting. I arrived in Philly in 2002, like the Phrenology era. So, I mean, that album, has the joint, The Water on it, which is, at the time it wasn't quite clear. Everyone thought, but it's a dedication to Malik B, and it kind of tells the story of Tariq and him and meeting and this drive that they had and this like, yo, like, let me help you get over the water and join us. So I wasn't privy to that era that you're speaking of, only through listening. But in the years that followed, I mean, I've seen the Roots more live than any other hip hop artist, and probably any artist, period, just by virtue of the Roots picnics, going to shows, you know, having them pop up Grammy stuff with you. Like it's been amazing. So I've watched the group evolve, and I've seen Malik perform. My favorite Roots album is Game Theory, which you know, it just suits the city so well. And what's great about that album is you had Malik coming back in a few key spots, including the title track, which is nuts. Like, and oftentimes I find the Roots tend to begin all hometown shows with that song, at least Tariq with his verse. But I got to interview Malik on his own a few years ago by virtue of a solo album he did with Mr. Green, who's a friend of you and I in the site. And yeah, it was really interesting. You know, I often find these guys, Malik was not somebody who was in the public eye, highly respected in Philly, but I think people could walk by him on the street and not necessarily know it was him. So we don't know the cause of death or anything like that. And I need to, I want to pull up that conversation I had with him. It was not for AFH. It was for a website that is not around anymore. And I have it on my hard drive. But I just remember Malik being extremely humble, almost unaware of his own talent. And that's just remarkable too. And I encourage everyone to look at Black Thought, posted some really heartfelt stuff on Instagram and remembering his friend. And he even credited him, and I'm paraphrasing, as a more, you know, elite MC. If only a few things would have gone into play. So yeah, I mean, huge condolences to the Roots, to Mr. Green, to Philadelphia. I know the viewing, you know, I saw that it's basically in my backyard, and yeah, and especially the loved ones and family of Malik B. What a talented MC who I hope continues to get his flowers this year, and I really want to see his face on that Grammy screen, because the Roots have won a couple Grammys. So
yeah, you know, what do you recall about that album, the solo album that he put out?
Yeah, I mean, it's very good. It's funny, this week when he passed, as I tend to do with a lot of artists, I try to really just take a deep dive into their catalog, and it's not there. It's not on the DSPs, but I'm sure it's on YouTube. But Mr. Green is a phenomenal producer who has this knack for isolating an artist and bringing them to life. He did some amazing stuff with Pace One from The Outsiders. And with Malik, it really, like, you're not hearing Malik with Tariq, you're hearing Malik on his own. And it was just, you know, I know that his faith was extremely important to him. Tariq talked about that. It's come across in a lot of his verses. And, you know, it's unfair for me to speak on it because I haven't listened in a year or two, but I remember really liking the album and being really excited to have an opportunity to just speak to Malik one-to-one. Because I think over the years I'd asked Quest in interviews and maybe even Tariq just about Malik and his role in those early days. But to interview Malik on his own was just an honor, and there's not a lot of journalists I find that have that conversation. So if I can find it online, you know, maybe we'll put it in the you know, info as a link.
Yeah, no, that would be dope. That would be dope. You know, and it brings to the fore the thing that always happens, which is, you know, we often don't give, you know, artists their flowers until they're gone. And you know, I was watching Snoop on the Breakfast Club this week. Did you happen to catch that interview?
I did.
Great interview. I thought, you know, Snoop is just always so, he's just so his perspective is so well-rounded, and you know, he's such a philosophical dude, but he's fun and entertaining. You know, he sneaks those gems in. But one of the things that came up was, you know, him talking about Eminem, and he said that Eminem wasn't a top 10 MC. And, you know, a lot of people could and probably have spun that as a diss.
Right.
But for him, it was really more about really respecting the roots of hip hop, you know. And you know, for him, he was saying his top 10 way before Eminem is, he goes back to the 80s. And you know, his top 10 was Slick Rick, Ice Cube, LL, KRS, Rakim, Run, and DMC, Big Daddy Kane, Ice-T, and Too Short. You know, all artists who are from the 80s, all artists who inspired him, you know, and he didn't even put himself in that top 10 MC group. And so clearly no shade to M. But what do you think about that list? And what do you think about our tendency to discount the fact that these guys started something, they carved out, they forged a path that was not there before. You know, there are lots of artists who came along who might be more lyrically dexterous and like more commercial sales and everything. But the fact is that these guys cleared the forest for everyone who came before after them.
I love seeing somebody with a platform like Snoop rally for that. And it's not a top 50. It's not what was going on in 2019. This is a 10. And Snoop, more than anybody, he doesn't just talk about it, he bees about it. Like, you know, right from rip, Doggy Style, you know, he covers Lottie Dottie, which I always liked. I mean, to me, that's not biting. That was an homage. Snoop has done covers of, I believe, Paid in Full. He's definitely done Freaky Tales by Too Short, you know, on and on and on. He's really been a gap bridger for amplifying these voices, and he's worked with all of these guys just about. So I like that, and I like when lists, first of all, are different, not just for the sake of being different, but when they show really the formative MCs into who we are, whether we're artists or fans. And one of the things I always admire about you, Reggie, is like in your conversations talking about your GOATs at different points in your life, you always give it up to Melly Mel. You give it up to LL Cool J, both of whom in different ways I feel are omitted wrongfully on a lot of lists, especially for folks that have your, you know, context of age and growing up with it. So I love the list. I really do. And, you know, Snoop has worked with M. He's gone out of his way to sing his praises. I hope they work again, you know, someday. That is no slight. I just like somebody advocating our pioneers, our trailblazers, the folks that took hip hop from, you know, A to you know, middle of the alphabet in terms of technicality. And it's dope when it's Snoop to give it up to an Ice-T and a Too Short in particular. People love Cube, but I often feel that history sometimes discredits Ice as well as Short, just because sometimes their styles are deemed more simple or their content was more limited at times. But to see their influence is huge. And especially on somebody like Snoop. I mean, he is an extension of all of those people that he named. So I love it.
Yeah, you know, to your point, I've always looked at my favorites in terms of eras. You know, I have many favorite rappers, and it's by, you know, kind of time period and really stage in hip hop. So my first was Melly Mel for sure, you know, and incredible storyteller. His voice was booming. If you go back and listen to his rhymes, like his cadence and patterns were like more complex than anybody's at that time too. You know, he was just an elite MC. And then after Melly Mel came LL for me. You know, LL was the first like true superstar rapper. Is everything from his image to like his braggadocio, and he also had that power and force that Mel had. And just a whole different kind of swagger, and you know, much more street in terms of his image and things like that. And then after that, for me, it was Big Daddy Kane. You know, the first, you know, him and Rakim. It's hard to know who did it, but that multisyllabic style where you're rhyming, you know, entire sentences or phrases, and the cadence is just next level. And then after
Plus
that,
that
from
smooth confidence too that both of them
smooth,
had.
yeah, super smooth, both of them, you know, and soulful, you know, the whole nine. And then after that, for me was Cube, because Cube had that like, you know, he political. Again, the power. Like I'm seeing a theme. Like I like those dudes who like really are powerful in their voice. You know, then came Pac, and then Jay, and now Kendrick. You know, and again, there's that substance, that raw authenticity. But each one is great for his era in a way that I think exceeds, you know, almost all others. And it's difficult to compare them because it was different games each time. You know.
Sure. Yeah, I mean the stat columns are different, you know, just like they are in sports as the rules change. But let me ask you this: neither you nor I have ever publicly, or even I'm think with each other, like done a top 10 list. And this isn't the venue where I want to do it. But since Snoop's list looks unlike so many that we see, give me one artist on your top 10 today that might come as a surprise to me or some of the folks that are tuned in.
Today, I mean,
I'm not saying today MCs, but today, if you had to write down your list like Snoop did, who's an artist that, you know, might be a black sheep to a lot of lists?
a black sheep to a lot of lists. Wow. You know, I'm gonna say Fife,
Wow.
because you know I think Fife got shortchanged in A Tribe Called Quest. Like I think that when it came to lyricism, he was the superior MC in all in a Tribe Called Quest. You know, I think Q-Tip's got the voice and the swagger and the flow, but if you listen to Phife lyrically, he got at it. And you know, Tribe, their first album was great, but they really became Tribe, like the group that people revered and considered to be one of the best, if not the best of all time, when Low End Theory came. And I don't think that's a coincidence. That's when Phife stepped up and they gave him like true, like, you know, 50% responsibility on a mic. And man, he delivered. And you think about like verses like Scenario,
Yeah.
and like you know, Electric Relaxation, and you know, God Comes Through. Like your man, like he's got quotables for days.
I mean, my favorite Tribe albums are the ones in the middle, you know, Low End Theory, Midnight Marauders, and those two. Yeah, I mean, you know, I think there's other albums where Tip, you know, takes the reins lyrically. Certainly the first album, and then later on, you know, maybe on like Love Movement. But those two, which are the two Tribe albums I'm grabbing from a burning building. Yeah, Phife really stepped up. That's a good choice. Mine is also in native tongues. I'm going with Posthumous. He's never not moved from my top 10. And Dave, you know, Trugoy is not far behind him. But Posthumous, to me, I always look and I'm like, man, if he wasn't in a group, we would be talking about him in such a different light. And that's such a travesty of lists and perspective optics.
Yeah, that's true. Pos is super ill with it, and it's interesting. We both chose native tongues members too. You know, I think that we talked about this before, but how big do you think that role is? You know, being in a group that like prevents MCs from being considered a goat, and just think about how transcendent Black Thought and Andre must be to still be in that conversation, despite the fact that they were in groups.
Absolutely. I mean, it's so funny too, because it's about how early you can make that pivot. And Posthumous, Black Thought, they never did that, but Cube did. You know, the members of Wu-Tang, with the exception of Inspector Deck, who we're going to talk about a little bit later on this podcast, you know, were quick to market. They get looked at on their own. But yeah, I mean, it holds back Houdini, it holds back Run DMC, it holds back Phife, you know, who had a solo album that was pretty good. But we always think of these guys in terms of the groups, and that's just such a detriment, because we don't do that with sports, you know, with team sports. Yeah, and it's just a travesty of perspective.
So speaking of groups and top shelf MCs, I was watching Hip Hop Evolution, the latest season. Despite it being arguably my favorite documentary series on hip hop ever, aside from the one that I produced at BET, or the two, I must say, like putting those aside, I think it's just unbelievably well done. But I was looking at this last one, which focused, as you know, on the South. And Lil Wayne, you know, I've never been the biggest Lil Wayne fan in terms of his music. Like, I've always respected what he's done. Like, I give it up to his lyrics and everything. But for me, the substance didn't align with my own personal taste. You know, as you've seen, like, I like people who are talking about things that are going on in the world, and, you know, really giving insight into like what makes them tick as human beings and things like that. And Wayne has kept it much more surface level, mostly about drugs, sex, you know, stuff like that, and just clever punchlines. And, you know, no shade, it's just what he's done. But that being said, in watching the episode about Cash Money, I realized something. So I've had this theory about Wayne for a long time, that he is the only artist in hip hop to ever have had, you know, platinum level status, you know, superstar status, fall off for a few years, and then come back and become bigger than he ever was before. Like, I can't think of a single other artist who's ever done that. Can you?
To that magnitude, no. You got your like 2 Chainz stories with Player Circle, but that's a very narrow window.
He wasn't multi-platinum, you know, before either. You know.
No, I mean, they had a hit song. Yeah, that's a really good point. And I'm racking my brain, but I don't think there's anyone that can do it on the level that Wayne has. You know.
Yeah, no one ever has.
Arguably, Wayne has maybe fallen, quote unquote, fallen off twice. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. So that being said, and watching this, this documentary, I came up with another theory that I think helps to crystallize it. Now, bear with me and fight me. Like my old boss used to say all the time, fight me, fight me.
You like that quote too.
But I'm going to say, Lil Wayne is the Michael Jackson of hip hop. And here's why. You ready?
Okay.
All right. So first of all, they were both in groups when they were younger, right? And both children stars. Michael was 5'6". You know, Wayne, people forget, man, Lil Wayne was 14 when the Hot Boys dropped.
Yeah.
Which means he was probably recording at like 12, 13. Like he was truly a little boy. I mean, it's crazy. And the little like applied, you know, more than size, just mentality. He was a boy. And the Hot Boys, you know, the band, the name says it right there. They were effectively a boy band. You know, they were the equivalent in hip hop of a boy band. Of course, now Juvenile
was older.
And other guys, they're grown men.
Yeah.
But you get what I'm saying. They were a prefabricated group put together, you know, to check a lot of different boxes, and you know, and present to the world like that. So he was the child star in a hip hop, like, you know, group, like superstar group, boy band.
Okay.
Now, you know, they had a good 2-3 year run, which in hip hop, like people, I think often don't contextualize, but like most runs in hip hop are 2 or 3 years. You know what I mean? That was for Kane, for, you know, Rakim, for EPMD. You know, we just talked about the key albums for like a lot of artists have a 2 or 3 year run.
Yeah.
And then he fell off, and it was his late teens, right? So then he has a couple years where he's not that active. His first solo album comes out, you know,
Carter One.
Yeah, Carter One, and you know, it's a good album, but it doesn't have the same kind of commercial success that he had received when he was part of the Hot Boys, and so in a lot of ways, it's a disappointment. You know, it didn't go platinum. I'm not even sure it went gold. Now the same thing happened with Michael. So Michael, you know, the Jacksons, you know, stopped performing together. Michael comes out with Forever Michael, which people don't even think about, but that was his first solo album. You know,
what year did that one come out?
I don't know, man. I think 78, 77, something like that.
There was no, I'm just asking because, again, I lacked a contextual lens. There were no solo Michael, like, quote unquote, kiddie albums, like in the early 70s?
No. He may have, you know, I'm not sure, like, if Ben and stuff like that, like that soundtrack.
Those were like singles or something.
Yeah, exactly. But no solo album. Forever Michael's the first solo album. Same thing, you know, doesn't do anything close to what he had done as part of the Jacksons. So that there's a parallel there. Then their second albums come out and they receive massive critical acclaim. Now, so the second album is the one that most people attribute to being Michael's first solo, which is Off the Wall. And for Wayne is the Carter 2, which today people still often say is his best album, you know, from a lyrical, technical, musical perspective. You know, it didn't have the same kind of commercial success as other things, but in terms of critical acclaim, a lot of people think that's Wayne's best album.
Right, and it influenced everyone else after it, even if we don't understand it in the way. So I'm riding with you at this point in the way that Off the Wall did, because Off the Wall, like in '79, set the soundtrack up for the early '80s, right? Yeah,
absolutely. And I'm gonna take a liberty here, and I'm gonna group in Wayne's mixtapes that went along with that Carter 2 era. You know, because that is when people started taking note of this guy and saying, "Wow, this guy truly might be the best in the game right now." And it helped that Jay-Z was gone too. But that whole body of work around the Carter 2, you know, including the mixtapes, is what really completely changed the game for Wayne. Just like, you know, I think that Off the Wall set the stage for Michael. So Off the Wall comes, sets the stage. It's got some huge singles. Listen, still timeless singles. You put on like Don't Stop Till You Get Enough right now, and it's gonna get the party started right
Rock
now.
With You.
Rock With You, gonna get the party started, you know. But then they set the table for what became, for each artist, defining albums of their careers, and also just like set new standards in industry. So Thriller comes out next for Michael, the biggest album of all time. You know, it's going back and forth with the Eagles' greatest hits, and it's greatest hits, right? So come on now. Like,
right,
stop.
That's not a fair fight. Yeah,
exactly. So Thriller comes out, biggest album of all time. Michael is dominating all of pop culture for a good 2, almost 3 year span. There's nothing but Michael Jackson. For Wayne, Carter 3 comes out, and this is like 2008, 2009, and Wayne sells 1 million copies in the first week, at a time where like music sales are like almost at their nadir, right? Like, to do 1 million in a week in 2009 is like 3 million in 2000. You know, I mean, it's astronomical what this guy does.
That was 08, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, right? Or 2008. Either way, you know, still like it's astronomical. And you know, so there's the parallel to, and Wayne's the biggest guy in hip hop. Hip hop is the biggest genre in music, and so Wayne is the biggest guy in music at this point too. So you know, there's another parallel. They both on their you know third solo album are the biggest artists, you know, in the culture at their time. You know, now neither one of them. Here's my theory: neither one of them achieves that level of success without having had their success as, you know, youngsters. Because now what they've done is they've created a multi-generational fan base. Their fan base extends 20 years or so. And because of that, they have an advantage that most artists don't. Most artists have a 2, 3, 4, 5 year fan base. These guys have, you know, 20-year fan bases effectively, or 15-year fan bases. And so the demo that they can cater to is just much larger. So all that is to say that Lil Wayne is the Michael Jackson of hip hop.
Yeah, I mean, and I see that they had like a longer J curve because people knew it. Like, and at the time that Carter 3 dropped, I was working as a youth advocate, so I had like 6 young guys with me between the ages of 8 and right before they turn 18, and they had grown up watching Wayne for the exact reasons you're saying. Like, they knew him from you know wobbling with the Hot Boys into what became, you know, when Wayne was saying I'm the greatest rapper alive. So I 100% see you on that. Also, I mean, you know, Joe Jackson's the father of all the Jacksons, but Michael's the star. You know, in the Hot Boys, you know, Birdman was his, you know, step-in legal guardian. So it was in, you know, Wayne became the focal point, even though Juvenile came first, then BG, then Wayne, and sort of Turk later on. Yeah, I mean, the spotlight was always kind of set on Wayne after that initial success.
Yeah, and to that point, they both had very public fallouts with their father figures. You know what I mean?
And reconciliations of some sort too.
Yeah, yeah.
That's interesting. Also, though, you know what's funny is, like, in so many ways, I want to make the Quincy Jones Manny Fresh comparison. But the exact moment that Wayne starts to take flight with the Carter 2 is when he stops working. I mean, when Manny did not produce that whole album. It was like a host of kind of fresh faces and folks that, you know, would later become, you know, notable people like the Runners and Cool and Dre. But yeah, Wayne didn't have a Quincy necessarily, unless we say it's Birdman.
Yeah, well, yeah, no, that's the one divergence. You know, he definitely didn't have that. But with Michael, you know, he showed that he didn't, while Quincy definitely took him to the next level, he was still able to replicate that success even without him, because Dangerous, you know, with Teddy Riley was a huge album too. You know, it wasn't Thriller level, but it was Bad level. It was off the wall level for sure, you know.
Yeah, I mean, and does Wayne have that? I mean, has Wayne evolved past Thriller? I know that that's your window of looking at it, but does the comparison still go beyond Carter 3 and Thriller, as you mentioned, Dangerous?
You know, it's interesting. I think, and we talked about this before, I think Carter 4 was a good album. You know, I think that, you know, the delays obviously affected it, and, you know, a lot of people thought that it sounded dated, but I do think that it was a strong album, and it sold, you know, well, especially after a 5-year hiatus. And to your point before about him making a second comeback, I'm not sure if he's had a second comeback, because, you know, he hasn't like reached the same levels that he did before. But you know, I think that he's restored himself as an MC that's still relevant, and, you know, that people still view as a superstar in today's day and age.
I agree with you. And his most recent album I thought was very impressive. You know, there were songs I think that could have been pulled from it. I felt the same way at the time about the Carter 3. I was like, if you take what's great about the Carter 3 and just keep it, like, you take the best 5 on that versus the best 5 on the Carter 2, I'm riding with the Carter 3. But that being said, again, to your point, I've never found there's songs on the Carter 3 that people unanimously hate. And I think that's probably true of Thriller too. There's really, you know, me and Duckworth had an interesting conversation about, you know, The Girl Is Mine, but even still, like, that record's somebody out there's favorite. And I find that to be the case too with just about every joint. Like, I hated the you know, Mrs. Officer joint with Bobby Valentino, but
too R&B for you, right?
to a lot of things, but there's people out there that love it and go crazy when they hear that song. So, you know, there's something for everyone. Thriller, Carter 3, I see that. I do.
Yeah.
I can't fight you that much on this. I think you're onto something.
All right, okay, well, fair enough. So you mentioned 2 Chainz as a possible contender. 2 Chainz happens to be one of the next 2 in Verzuz. Swizz Beatz and Timbaland's Verzuz. It's 2 Chainz versus Rick Ross.
Yep.
Now, what do you think about this matchup? And this is the first one to have artists who are still kind of currently, okay, I'm gonna ask you that question. Do you think they're still kind of currently in their peak, or do you think they're on the decline? Because if you think the former, then this is the first time that 2 contemporary artists are being chosen for this.
That's a really good question that I didn't necessarily think about. And, you know, I mean, I don't look at RZA and Premier that way either, but I know what you mean. I hope they're not, but they're legacy artists. They are. I mean, they're artists that we've known for 15 plus years, you know, so I think they fit into that. I mean, I really hope this next DMX album with Def Jam is incredible. Do I expect it to be better than It's Dark? Not really. I hope I'm surprised. So yeah, it's the same thing. Ask me what I thought about it. It's a departure for me from Snoop and X. Like, to me, that's just the highest note. But that being said, the show must go on, and I think it's an interesting one to go back down south. I don't think this is a fair fight. I think that Rick Ross kind of pancakes, you know, 2 Chainz on this one.
Ooh, wow! We're gonna really disagree on this one.
Oh, word?
We're gonna really disagree on this, and you know,
okay.
Okay, so 2 Chainz has grown on me. I was, you know, when he first came out, wasn't really a fan, but then it's actually when he did his cipher.
Okay.
When he did his BT cipher, I had the opportunity to see that uncut, you know, before it dropped, and I got to focus on the lyrics. And he said, I can't remember. I think this is the cipher, but he said, "Put my gun to your eye, call it glaucoma." Like I was like, wow! Like the dude, I started to really, and then when he had like the feds, you know, what's the joint he did with Pharrell? The feds, feds watching,
taking pictures,
feds watching,
taking photos, or
he said, Heather B, he had a line about Heather B, but he is just so like lyrical. You know, he's deceptively lyrical. When you really
he's a better
on
MC.
his words, he's an incredible MC. But there's that. But also 2 Chainz, he's got big club hits, and he's got so many features. He's got so many features, you know, with Drake, and like, you know, he's got tons and tons of features. Kanye, you know, all the good music stuff. When it comes to 20 records, so Ross might have 40, 50 records.
Yeah.
But if you're going to call 20, 2 Chainz can go record for record with Rick Ross for sure.
You think 2 Chainz has records that Ross can't beat when they line up round for round?
I think he might, man. Think about Ross's big records, like his big records by himself. Maybe 5, 10, you know, and then you throw in some Khaled joints and things like that. And listen, this is coming from, you know.
You're the biggest Ross fan I know.
Exactly. I'm a massive Rick Ross fan. You know, I ride hard for Ross, but, you know, in fact, I've helped Rick Ross in his career in ways that he'll never know. But, you know, for Ross, he's got great records, but, you know, 2 Chainz, 20 for 20? Come on, man. Like, it's going to be I think you're going to be surprised by this.
If this was a rap battle, 2 Chainz all day long. And I think Ross is a very, very good MC. I'm not the fan that you are. And, you know, I've interviewed and I've covered both of these guys for well over a decade each, but I still think Ross's catalog, and if we're going to go features, it's easy to forget You know, I mean, the Khaled records alone. I mean, Ross has been there, and yeah, and Ross has a much bigger window to work with. I mean, 2 Chainz's solo career took flight in like 2010. His debut solo album was in 11. You know, Ross Port of Miami drops, I think, in 06. Yeah, I mean, Ross has those extra 5 years to pull from. I mean, at best, 2 Chainz can rock one player circle. You know, I mean, if he wants to do Duffel Bag Boy, which was really, in my opinion, Wayne's show, and that's not the 2 Chainz that people fell in love with. I don't know. I don't see that happening. I think this is a letdown because, you know, I think Ross and Jeezy would have been a far more interesting battle for a lot of reasons. Obviously, there's personal context there, and I think Ross would have taken Jeezy too, for what it's worth. But
you think Jeezy has more hits than 2 Chainz?
Possibly, but what I'm saying more so, it's like when 50 stepped to Snoop, like the catalogs line up better. You know, I mean, those guys honestly were like in parallel lanes to each other. Both of them had these groups. Both of them got labels. Obviously, Ross was a bit more successful. But even that, I mean, think of the records that Ross, the features he has with Wale or Meek or, you know, I mean, he's got joints with Gunplay. He can go any number of ways with this catalog. He can
go soulful. He can go trap.
And 2 Chainz is so underrated as an MC in like hip hop head circles. Like, there's so many people that don't want to give 2 Chainz his props because of his content, or maybe because of his meteoric rise in popularity. Yo, he deserves all of those props, but I don't think he can handle Ross on this. I think it's the equivalent to me of, you know, like those great technical MCs that lack a classic album. You know, I'm just trying to make the comparison. Like, I mean, it's knee jerk, but like your Cannabises or your Chino XLs or your, you know, like it's like that where the catalog doesn't measure up to the skills, and we know the skills are there. And not for nothing, yeah. I mean, 2 Chainz has a few incredible, like he might have my favorite verse on Mercy, but how's that going to play out in this battle? I don't know.
Mercy, I mean, Bees in the Trap, Birthday Song, you know, is he on Click? No, he's not on Click. There's a big Kanye joint that I'm missing. Is he on Blessings? I can't remember. He's on one of those big, good music. You know,
besides Mercy.
Yeah, and what's the Cruel Summer joint that he's on? Man, I mean, he's on so many joints I've forgotten, dude. That like it's insane. Like, you know, it's gonna be. I'm very, very curious to see it. You know, but the other thing. So here's an interesting thing. Okay, so whether or not these guys are still, you would say they're contemporary, right? They're still contemporary. They're not legacy.
Oh yeah, 100%.
The interesting thing is they're both over 40. And there's a list that came out this week of the top the top 40 rappers over 40. Mm-hmm. And the interesting thing about the list is it's not, you know, just anyone who's lived into their 40s. It's actually material that they put out in their 40s. Yeah.
After they turn 40.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm gonna give you the top 10. The top 10 are LP, Styles P, Rick Ross is 8, 7 is Eminem, 6 is Ghostface Killah, 5 is Killer Mike, 4 is Black Thought, 3 is Pusha T, number 2 is Royce the 5'9", and number 1 is Jay-Z. So first of all, you know, we've been saying this about Royce for a long time, that Royce has done what no other artist has done in terms of like putting out his best music now at this stage in his career. What do you think about that list in general? And by the way, 2 Chainz, number 11.
Number 11, interesting. I love the concept, first of all. Just as a journalist and as somebody who's, you know, run a few websites in my career, like I have so much, you know, loving jealousy for this concept. It's just something that I feel like we should have done at AFH, and I salute, you know, the from, you know, Rob Markman, you know, Jermaine Hall, B Dot. There's a host of people. I think Remy Ma contributed to this.
Yeah.
There's a host of people that we know and respect that are behind this, and it shows in the work. The top 10 is something I love about this list. I love really that number 2 spot. It's so easy, and it's so predictable at times to go the industry route. And yes, there's a lot of heavy hitters in that top 10. But in my opinion, you know, Royce, I'm not going to argue that number 1, they got it wrong, because, you know, what Jay's done in the last decade, especially with 444, is huge. Royce is my number 1 in this category, but I really like to see that. And then absolutely to see LP, Killer Mike gets a lot of props. You and I dedicated a lot of real estate in the last episode talking about him, but LP, what he's doing right now in his 40s is remarkable. So yeah, I really, really, really like the concept, like the list. I have, you know, as just a hip hop head, what's cool is they list, you know, the artists, the age, how many projects they've put out, not albums, but projects they've put out since they turned 40. And then I think best song, right?
Yeah.
I like that. I disagreed a lot with the best songs. 2 Chainz was not one I disagree with, because they had Threat to Society on there, which is my favorite Ninth Wonder production in years and years and years, and it's my favorite 2 Chainz song, period. But yeah, I like the top 10. Before we expand into the 40, what do you think?
Well, so, you know, again, yeah, I agree with you. And Jermaine Hall, who, you know, heads up Levels, the site that put this together, you know, I told him that I was jealous of it. And, you know,
Yeah.
I also told him that we should have been on that panel. He was fronting on that. Like,
Word, yeah.
But, and I'm saying it publicly.
Yeah.
But it's a fantastic concept, you know. In terms of the list itself, you know, it's hard not to put Jay number 1, because, you know, just his body of work is so incredible overall. But for 444 to be one of his, I believe, one of his top 3 albums, I think it stands there with Reasonable Doubt and The Blueprint, you know, and maybe the Black Album too. But I put it above the Black Album just in terms of the content.
That's heavy, yeah.
Yeah, just because, you know, Black Album is more the same as Jay talking about how dope he is as an MC. And,
at the highest level. I got you.
Game and stuff like that.
Yeah.
444 is talking about real life stuff, you know. So
Yeah.
like I think it's just next level for Jay. So it's hard to say that arguably the greatest MC ever who put out his greatest work in his 40s shouldn't be number 1, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But that being said, I think the biggest surprise for me is LP at number 10.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's incredible. Yeah, it's no coincidence that both he and Mike are in the top 10, because I think that Run the Jewels is one of the premier elite artists of
They
the
have
last
impact
5 years or so. Yeah, and the fact that they've both done that in their 40s is pretty incredible, you know. But I think the list is great. You know, Styles, you know, at 45, number 9. He's been so prolific. You and I know that, I think, better than almost you know, anyone, just given how much coverage we gave him on the site over the years.
Yeah, he puts out, I mean, and that, I like that. One of the things I love about this list too is they give Ish from you know, Shabazz Palaces, who a lot of heads know from Diggable Planets. Like, so many lists don't consider that, because, you know, Shabazz Palaces doesn't fit into the daily rap conversation too often. I mean, there's people out there that cover them, you know, very well, but I often find that, like, bread and butter hip hop discussions don't consider that. And it's just somebody who's had an incredible second life, you know, and yet still tours with Diggable, which is great. So to see him on there was dope.
Well, they had him at number 15, and that was surprising to me, because one, I'm not familiar with what he's done in his 40s. He's 51 now, but you know, I haven't seen him having had that kind of impact as other MCs on here. So to have him at number 15 was really surprising. Do you think that 15 ranking was accurate?
I think it is, and I think it considers music at large. Again, like, I think that in the, you know, in the hip hop, like, barbershop conversation, the lunch table conversation, you would have to be a fan of that group. I mean, but that group is, you know, I don't like using terms like alternative hip hop, but they are, you know, trailblazers in a movement that is very prominent and very successful, and he's in it. And I don't think a lot of people make that connection.
Yeah, but again, this is only music done in your 40s, though.
No. But this is recent music, you
Oh,
know.
okay, yeah. So, okay,
Yeah,
got you. Okay, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
100% in favor of that. I loved that was an Easter egg for me. I think that this list does great disservice to three people in particular.
Okay.
Biggest one is Rock Marciano.
Okay.
Rock, I mean, you know, is the architect, and I don't think Planet Asia gets enough props either, because I think PA deserves, and I'm not saying on the list, I don't know what PA's age is, he might not even be 40, but you know, rock style, you know, has influenced a lot of what we see going on right now, from Griselda on down, and they're quick to tell you that too. And Rock was very, very low on this list. I mean, he was, I think, in
33, number 33.
yeah, like giving Fab number 23, and maybe I seem like a Fab hater, and putting Rock at 33 doesn't add up to me, especially when I don't believe Fab was in his 40s when he put out, you know, the joint with Jadakiss, the Nightmare on Elm Street joint. I think that the list also does a bit of a disservice to E40. You know, E40 doesn't have the impact of Run the Jewels, but no one is more prolific than E40. And if we're going to sit around and hand, you know, flowers to Snoop and to other people that put out a lot of projects, whether they resonate or not, you can maybe make this case with Bun B. E40 does the damn thing. And when you talk about the 2 Chainz type of wordplay, you know, even 2 weeks ago, E40 put out a joint that was socially distance themed. And I'm like, yo, his wordplay is better than it was when he made his classic albums like Federal and the stuff with the Click. So those are 2. And then the other thing that I thought was a little bit low was Inspector Deck. Because Inspector Deck is up there, I mean, closer to 50, if I'm not mistaken. And what he's done in his 40s with Czarface, with Esoteric and 7L, yeah, I mean, it might not permeate the mainstream that way, but sort of like Rock, you've got to give it up to that dude. And I would have loved to see those 3 higher. But in total, I mean, rankings, you're always going to have your debates. Incredible concept, incredible list. And I thought, you know, with what they did in particular with like Pusha T and Fonte, which are guys who are in their very early 40s, but have had great impact over the last 2 years. I really liked seeing that too, because, you know, what Pusha T's done since 2018 is massive, you know.
Yeah, I'm going to go with my 2 that I thought got short shrift were Fonte, because he's only, and he, you know, listen, he's only 41, so he's only put out 2 projects. But if you're going to rank Royce at number 2 based off 2 projects, and Jay based off, you know, 2 solo projects and the Jay Electronica thing, then I think that 2 is fair game. And his 2, you know, his last solo album and Little Brother joint, I think are among the best, you know, any 40-year-olds have done. And so I think that he actually deserved a top 10 look.
When we were covering No News is Good News, I don't think Fonte had turned 40 yet when that came out. I think this really only includes maybe his EP, which was, you know, primarily singing, and LB. I could be mistaken on that, and I didn't read into the caption.
Well, yeah, that album, the one with where he's talking about like food and, you know, stuff like that, he was definitely 40 on that, because he's talking about being 40. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got you.
And then the Little Brother joint was incredible. And then, you know, the other person who didn't even make the list, and it was actually one of our readers when we posted it, I was checking out the comments, who put this up. And again, you know, maybe one album, but probably more than that, is Master Ace.
Because, yo, that's huge.
Yeah, because that album with, you know, with
Marco
Polo, Brooklyn Story was one of the best top 5 albums of 2018 or whenever it came out.
Yeah,
and I think some of Ace's best work ever. And
I'm so glad
he's got other stuff too.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that, because Ace is somebody that I go on record all the time and credit, as you and I have talked about on here. We talk about Royce and Black Thought and sometimes AZ, but Ace is somebody that I truly believe is better today than he was in, you know, Master, you know, in Sitting on Chrome. Like, I would much rather listen to a Brooklyn Story than the Master Ace Incorporated stuff. And everyone has their own taste, but he's matured, he's grown. Yeah, that is, and those guys that and women that were part of that list, they know Ace too. I mean, like, he would be on their radar. So, you know, omissions happen.
Yeah, and to match you on your three, I'm gonna go with another one of your guys, like
Okay.
Cormega.
Word. He was not on the list, right?
Yeah, not on the list. So yeah.
Damn. Interesting. That's a really good point because Mega's put out, an EP and an album. I don't know what his age is at this point, but he's been very, very busy in recent years, and I know he's got more in the can. Word. Yeah. Mega, Ace. All right. Maybe they'll come. You remember when the Source used to like redo its ratings later on? Maybe this
Yeah.
needs some honorable mentions or something.
Yeah, well, two dudes who were definitely on the list, deservedly so, who we've covered extensively in their 40s, are Raekwon and Ghostface Killer.
Mm.
And, they had a really momentous week with the 25th anniversary of Only Built for Cuban Links. What did that album mean to you? And, what's your take on it 25 years later?
So I think I bought that album in 97. Like, so I am not a original purple taper. I have the purple tape, but it's not an original. It's the reissue that they made with Get On Down a few years ago. So, I mean, I was 11 when it dropped. So I bought the album when I was either 12 or 13. And it was one of those albums, I don't know if this has happened with you, but that album's not made for an 11 or 12-year-old. Like it took me years later to really appreciate what was there. But that being said, I mean, I remember buying it at Zia Records in Tucson, Arizona, and I remember loving Criminology. I remember loving Incarcerated Scarfaces, just the beats, the rhyme style, what he was saying. But that is definitely something that continues to unravel its greatness with time. And I listen to it, as I do often with these anniversaries. Like I played it 2 or 3 times over the weekend, and it is so original, from the vocals to the interplay between Ray and Ghost to what, RZA brought to the table. It's an archetype,
Yeah, even the slang, for me, the distinct memory is, so I just graduated law school, took the bar, and my roommates from college and I went on vacation. It's like our last, long vacation together. And we were gone for, I think, 10 days. And one of my roommates brought that CD. And, I was late on the purple tape thing too, because I had the album, but I always had it on CD.
Yeah.
And we listened to that album the entire time for like 10 days. And yo, son, like the slang, everything was taken from that, so it definitely, it presented like a movie. It was very cinematic, and the characters were very well defined and influential. And so, just an amazing, amazing album.
Where do you think? I mean, this is a question that always gets people talking, but let me frame it to you this way: is it the best Wu solo album, in your opinion?
Yeah, so I think it's hard to call it a solo album, given how much Ghost was involved in it. I truly do see it as a collabo album.
Sure.
I think I'm going to say this. I think it is the second best Wu album, period.
Oh, word. Wow.
36 Chambers.
That's an interesting point.
That's what I'm going to say.
Yeah, I mean, taking that, I'm going to go, and this is like, do you like red wine or white wine? Like, to me, I've always been a Supreme Clientele guy. Like that to me is the benchmark solo Wu project. But this one is just on its tails. And I'm going to say, of the whole Wu-Tang catalog, it's number 3. And, there's people out there that will hear this from you and I and say, well, what about Liquid Swords? What about Takao? What about ODB's debut or the second Wu album? But I'm with you on that. It's an incredible body of work, and nothing about it chases radio. You and I and Havoc sat down to talk about, the infamous, as it celebrated 25 years, same label, too, Loud Records. And man, I mean, even Ice Cream is not a conventional radio song.
No, not at all. Not at all. Incarcerated Scarfaces, they're just completely unorthodox.
Yeah, and the way they incorporated features, bringing Nas on at a time like that, certainly you had albums in the early 90s with like Cube working with, Scarface, or, G-Rap getting those guys. There were big features. Pac had, guys on his albums, but this idea of, rival movements, not rival like there was beef, but like Nas is on the come up, Biggie's on the come up. You have Nas hop over to this record is huge. Yeah, it's just really well done, and yeah, it's not something that's designed to skip. It's just a lean back experience.
Yeah. And so along with this news, Raekwon announced something very big, which is that that the Only Built for Cuban Links is now going to be an official trilogy. So we had the second album, which came out about, it came out
2009.
2009. So 14 years or so after the first. And that album, I think, is probably Raekwon's second best album.
Yeah.
And it's slept on too. The joints with Dr. Dre, like it's a really
Dilla.
fantastic
Yeah.
album. And so, what do you think about the third? And what do you think about? So, okay, so I get movies, right, where movies have narratives and characters that can live through, different installments of the franchise. What do you think about this notion of naming albums as sequels when there's really nothing uniting them aside from the fact that it's the same artist?
I think Raekwon is an exception to that rule. I'm often so disappointed when artists use the sequel as like a marketing ploy and it doesn't measure up. But that's what I thought. I mean, I was running Hip Hop DX's editorial at the time, and in 2009 we declared the Purple Tape 2 the album of the year, and I stand by that 11 years later because Raekwon did it so well. And no, it's not totally produced by RZA, but the lyrical content and the mood and the theme was matched. I mean, it was very stylized, like, yo, I know what you're expecting from me. I'm going to give it to you. There is a little bit of an element of like, let's bring in some fun guests. Let's get Dre, let's get Slick Rick. Like, let's make it a little bit of that, kind of tribute show, in the Grammys or whatever. But he did it so well. To me, that's the greatest sequel album. I put it over Stillmatic, which you can argue is a sequel or not. So with this, I have faith in Raekwon, given his pedigree when he did it the first time. You and I, a few episodes back, were talking about AZ making Do or Die 2. And AZ's been dragging that out for, over a decade. With Raekwon, I believe he's going to do it. I think he needs to do it. He did prove since 2009 that he can make a great album outside of the Purple Tape theme, which I think was Shaolin versus Wu-Tang in 2011. That was a great body of work. But this is what fans want. Now, after it happens, please put it to bed and give it the same level of attention that you gave the second one, because the expectations are high. And in the interview he did, I think it was with Hip Hop DX, Raekwon compared the Purple Tape to The Godfather, which there are 3 of, and there's a lot of Godfather people that say the second one's better than the first. But unanimously, I've never found anyone that says that Godfather 3 is better than either of the first 2. So please don't go out like my man Francis Ford Coppola on number 3,
Well, there's a saying that, what does every last installment in a film franchise have in common?
They all suck.
It didn't make money.
Oh, okay, word.
So basically because they suck, So,
yeah.
For me, man, it's interesting. We already talked. I can only think of one artist who has had, albums of the same name in a series where an album that came after the first was better.
Wayne.
That's it, right? That's it. Because Jay, Blueprint 2, I didn't think was a good album. Blueprint 3, I liked that album a lot, but it definitely wasn't better than the Blueprint,
Right.
Same thing for Only Built for Cuban Links. Can you think of any other artist besides Wayne who has had a sequel to an album that's been better than the original?
It's a really good question. I'm racking my brain like to the independents, thinking about things that way. I mean, and we're not counting mixtape series, right? Like Joe Budden with Mood Music, or like there's certainly cases to be made, but to me that's a mixtape at an album level of like, yo, this is what I'm presenting to you after a year or 2 years in the studio. Not off top. I mean, I know there's some good ones, but no. And I really stand by that because I've given it a lot of thought over the last decade. There's nothing that I put over Purple Tape 2 when it comes to the sequels.
Yeah, so then for me, that to me is an argument not to do it because you're only damaging the brand by doing it. You know, think about like The Matrix. Like The Matrix is an all-time classic film.
Yeah.
And you know, the second two after that are just garbage. And I always tell people there's only one Matrix. Like, I mean, there's other movies that don't even count as part of the series. But so, you know, if you're not going to make a better product than your original, I don't know why you do it. Especially when there's no, like, you know, there is no cut and dry. Raekwon, I take your point. It is cinematic and you reprise the characters. If there's a narrative, a storyline through it, then cool. But if not, then, you know, why even lean on the name? To me, it almost seems like a marketing ploy.
It does give Ray creative license to go back into a part of his life. Like, you know, even since the last one, I mean, and this falls into us talking about, you know, the levels list. You've got Jay, you've got Fonte, you've got Royce, you've got Black Thought. You've got artists out here proving that you can make incredible music that's relevant to your life in your 40s or 50s. And so for Ray, I mean, you know, Ray is not living like he was in 94 recording this in RZA's Staten Island basement. So it gives him license to go to a place that doesn't, because I mean, like, you know, let's call it what it is. Ray put out a 3-pack this year. He put out The Wild a couple years ago. His albums are not getting the love that they deserve. I think he plays a great role in the stuff that Wu-Tang releases when he's present in it. But Ray is kind of like, you know, it's like Scorsese. People want to see Scorsese make mob movies. So he does that in a new way with The Irishman. You know, this gives Ray license to give fans what they want, but you better treat that brand with care. And there's guys out there, even Ghost. Like, Ghost has been toying with Supreme Clientele 2 for years. AZ with his album. That's really dicey once you announce it and don't follow through, because fans are going to pester you about it forever. So I hope he delivers, and I hope he delivers in a way that treats that brand with care, because I think that's one of the reasons we celebrate 25 years of Only Built for Cuban Linx, because the second one never tarnished the legacy. It only upheld it.
Right. Well, yo, that's all I got. Anything else on the list you wanted to cover?
No, I mean, did you want to talk about T.I.?
I mean, nah.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
I will if you want to. But,
no.
And by the way, just to make it clear, this is not shade on T.I. This is
no.
T.I. I'll just, you know, so T.I. like Lloyd's of London, you know, a very premier, prominent insurance company. They are known for insuring unorthodox things like athletes' legs. You know, Kim Kardashian, I think, has actually got insurance on her butt. Like, I mean, they insure like all sorts of like unique, you know, things of value. And they've recently came out and said that they benefited from slavery and that they needed to own their part in that legacy. And so T.I. came out and said that as part of that, you know, taking accountability for that, they needed to pay reparations. And so, you know, that's the story. So.
Word, yeah. And I think two things I just want to add quickly, because we haven't talked about new music, and it was a slower week in music, but I think that there's something that I didn't even know released until I saw it from actually Photo Rob, who's a, you know, friend of the site. But you know, Pete Rock produced a new album this week for Flea Lord, you know, who's an MC that's come up with like 38 Special and worked with, you know, a few different folks, and it's called The People's Champ. So if you're a Pete Rock head, I totally encourage you to check it out. You know, Pete's taken these whole projects like Smoke DZA and, you know, Benny the Butcher and a bunch of different stuff in recent years. And this one, it's independently released, but it's like 10 songs, nothing longer than 3 minutes. It's got that, you know, those Pete Rock drums, and Flea Lord is definitely, you know, a New York artist worth checking out right now that's making moves. And the other project that I just wanted to shine a quick light on is Currency and Harry Fraud. They put out a collaborative album in late July called Outrunners, and it's been in heavy rotation for me. Wiz is on there, Conway, Jim Jones, Rick Ross, who we've talked about. And I'm not the biggest Currency fan. I think when he's great, he's great. Like, the Stoned Immaculate was a dope album. Some of the stuff he did with Ski Beats back in the day like Pilot Talk 2, which was that might be a sequel better than the first, not on the level. But this is the best Currency joint I've heard in a minute. And Harry Fraud, who, you know, has made great records with Ross and Smoke DZA and some other people, Action Bronson. He brings his A game. So I encourage anyone, if you're one of those fans that just sees so many Spitta projects coming out and you don't know which ones to check, this has been really, really enjoyable music. So just
and I haven't checked it out yet, but I'm glad to know that, because they have actually got a series of albums, collaborative albums together too, and I think Harry Fraud brings out the best in Currency, so it doesn't surprise me that this one is a standout.
Yeah, and you mentioned
those artists sound amazing too. The features,
they really do, and you know, it's a lot of card talk, a lot of weed talk, and it's very like I think it had to be recorded right before it came out. There's a lot of pandemic talk in there. So and you mentioned Core Mega recently showed me a joint Harry Fraud produced with him that will be appearing soon, and all the more reason why he should have been on that list.
Word.
So what's your song of the week, man?
Song of the week, man, is the one I sent you yesterday. Is my song of the day. I've had this in my head like most of the week. It's All Natural by Sweetback. Sweetback is Sade's band, and you know, in the mid '90s, when Sade was taking one of her kind of infamous breaks, they decided to get in the studio and create an album. Actually, they did a couple of albums under the name Sweetback, and it was packed with features. Maxwell, Mel LaRue from Groove Theory fame, and they did a song called Au Natural with Bahama Dia, and it's just laid back, just stone groove, you know, like you know, just like that lounge music from the '90s, but Bahama Dia just like goes and just with her laid back flow, and it's just so dope. But you know, that's been on my mind lately.
Yeah, you sent me that on Saturday afternoon. I was out running some errands, driving, and it was just great car music. So keeping in line with that car music and talking about Currency, I'm gonna give it up to a joint. It's one without features on the new album called Golden Chrome, and it's that car talk, and it reminded me of my father, and just good vibes for summer cruising. So
that's dope. Well, yo, man, always a pleasure.
Yes, indeed, man. Until we do it again.
Yeah, same. I enjoy that NBA live action.
Yes. All right.
All right, man. Later.
Peace.